KPCW visits a local coffee shop to talk with Mayor Dana Williams about his recent trip to China for a biodiversity conference.
There were 10 Nobel laureates that were part of this conference, and so having them present in terms of their science and chemistry background was great. This was a scientist from Belgium who was working on biofuels. These folks this is the principal of our sister high school. This is the principal of a vocational resort training high school. And this gentleman, Wang Xin, is the liaison with the Chinese Friendship Association that started the Park City High School Student Exchange Program 20 years ago. And this is an administrator in our sister school. This young woman, Julia Xu, is now with a travel agency called American Tours, Inc., is now the liaison to Park City through the Chamber of Commerce. We'll be setting it up and working on putting us on the map in terms of their tours. They actually do a 3-week tour that starts in the Bay Area, goes down to LA, up through Vegas, comes to Salt Lake, comes right by us and goes to Jackson Hole. So the idea of adding us into the tour with their programs was actually pretty easy. And this was the manager of that travel agency, and you can see they have a picture of Monument Valley on their wall, which I thought was phenomenal. Also spent some time at our sister high school, which I've been there before, and then I meet with their kids every 2 years when they come to Park City, so it's kind of a big deal when we go to visit them. Again, that's the vice mayor. And then this is the deputy director of the Chinese Association for Friendship with Foreign Countries. And you can see, again, pretty formal setting, and we had a dinner together, and basically was trying to thank them for all the work that they've done on the student exchange program, and it was this friendship association that basically got it started. So we got invited about 4 months ago to speak at the first global Congress on the preservation of biodiversity and what's happening globally in terms of biodiversity. They heard of Park City from the Secretary General of the United Nations, who had been to a talk that we had done on creating sustainable communities and what we do with open space preservation. And he thought Park City as a city had a pretty good story to tell. About 95% of the presentations at this were scientific reports, everything from the Department of Defense for the United States talking about their scenarios associated with climate change to the effects of pharmaceuticals on sewer sludge, which we have that problem here. And so really good conference. About 60 countries were there, and didn't present as countries, but presented as universities or scientific research groups or biotech or biofuel industry. So a great stage for Park City to be able to present on, and something that historically we haven't. We've mostly been associated with ski business, and so the idea that we're starting to get accolades for what this community's done in terms of creating a sustainable community was certainly very special. Then I spent 2 days in Shanghai working on a relationship with the University of Utah and University of Shanghai and Park City for bringing master students in tourism from China to Park City. They would attend classes at the U and then work part-time up here on work visas to learn about the tourist industry. And then the payback is when they go back, the majority of these kids go to work for travel agencies, and they'd be very familiar with somewhere in the West that hopefully they could bring people to. And then I spent 5 days in Beijing and spent a day with our sister high school that we have this next year will be 20 years that we've been sending kids back and forth between Beijing High School number 4 and Park City High. And so very well respected program in China. Lots of people are aware of it. And I'm familiar with several of the teachers, and the liaison who created this is part of an organization called the Chinese Association for Friendship with Foreign Countries. And so we had a celebration of also my 10-year involvement with them, because I think this program is absolutely phenomenal. And then had lunch with the vice mayor of Beijing, talking about tourism, met with some travel agencies and a travel magazine, and did some interviews and tried to set up just start planting the seeds of Park City as a tourist destination, and for a huge group of people that skiing isn't necessarily that big, but certainly touring the West and seeing national parks and showing that within 6 hours of Park City you have access to almost 14 national parks. They thought that was pretty intriguing. So 2-week trip, kind of a whirlwind, did not go to the wall, did not go to the Terracotta Soldiers, was kind of there on business, and I did get to take one afternoon and go up to 2 of the oldest Buddhist monasteries above Beijing and see those. And then a half a day in Shanghai, seeing the old city. So it was great, very worthwhile trip. Let me start a little more globally. I mean, one, I think that it's imperative that the U.S. and China start having a better relationship, and I think that's got to be based on respect and trade, and not on as some of the during the Republican debates. You had Rick Perry saying they'll end up on the dust heap of history. That's not going to happen. You have Mitt Romney saying, well, we got to carry a big stick with China. That doesn't go over very well in China. And on the other side of the coin, you had people like John Huntsman that actually understood where China's going. In my opinion, China's not going to be a communist country within 10 years. The government's changing so fast. So many new members of the Politburo are educated in the United States. And just from hundreds of people that I have spoken to in the couple of times I've been there, a lot of respect from the Chinese people toward the United States. And their culture's changing because under Mao and under communism, there was an obligation to raise the whole, that's what in society you should do. And lofty, and there's some very good things about that in my opinion, but they also are learning about the creativity of the individual and the fact that an individual can change the world. And people that I spoke to, it's like, who's the most famous American to you? Steve Jobs. No two ways about it. There was one man that they thought changed the world. So, needless to say, I think starting to go over there, meet people, show them that we'd be honored if their citizenry came to visit us, is taken as a sign of kind of going beyond the norm, because not a lot of places do that. I mean, it's about a lot of it's about very big business. This is not. This is about people's leisure activity with their disposable income, and you've got a burgeoning middle class there of somewhere in the neighborhood of 400 million people that are now getting to a socioeconomic level that they're traveling. And so, and one of the main things that they want to see is the West. You know, I don't know how many times I got asked if I was a cowboy. Told them I'm a former rancher, but who rode some horses, but I never really a cowboy. And so, I think the potential in terms of the fact that you go out and you actually go to their backyard and ask them to come here, I think is taken as a sign of respect. And I think the willingness to work with us is greater because we do it.
What do you think was the biggest impression that you made about Park City to the Chinese?
Probably, the Chinese, especially government officials or school principals or even the Friendship Association, very formal. And realizing that there's a mayor that's coming over there that isn't all that formal. And that if you can get beyond the formality and actually start meeting the people, I think you have a greater ability to actually work with them, because they realize that you're not a regular, or you are a regular person. You're not trying to push your power of your office or anything like that. They're not really familiar with that because mayors in China, for the most part, are appointed by the federal government. They answer to the federal government. Here, we don't answer to anybody, but the only people I answer to are the people who put me in office, and so my constituents. I don't really answer to the state or the federal government. I think over time will be a huge benefit.
Or was the biggest benefit to Park City from your trip?
I think there were two, because there were two different reasons. But one, I think the benefit of us being on the world stage in terms of especially land preservation, and this is a community through public-private partnerships and bonds for taxing, has done a phenomenal job in terms of trying to preserve land. And it was interesting talking about a philosophy that our city's future is not necessarily just based on what we build, it's based on what we don't build, because that's the reason people come here. And so from 1999, you've got a population that's taxed themselves to the tune of $40 million in order to buy open space. That's a big deal, and I think other people from other countries that were hearing that story, where usually it's the federal government or strictly government run, that this is something that was done in tandem with the government and the community. So I thought they found that pretty fascinating. And then the idea of putting us on the map in China in terms of an area that is the economy is based on tourism and a very welcoming community to everyone who comes here, that the potential is to start bringing Chinese tourists to Park City. That's certainly the goal. It takes time, and I think basically what we're doing right now is trying to plant seeds that over the next several years will germinate and grow into something.
For KPCW, I'm Nate Vineyard.